Let's talk military. Donald Trump was quoted saying at the start of the operation that it could last 4 weeks. Recently, that number has changed, and he said now a few days. But what do we know so far about the strategy of this ongoing war? Joining me now to break down this military operation and all of the latest developments is our panel of experts. Now, Benjamin, I actually want to turn to you now and ask you what is your take on the Israeli intelligence, and if you could just give us the international perspective. I mean, is everything that Israel doing inside of Iran legal at this point? How is it viewed internationally?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I think it should be very clear to everybody that despite the efforts of the commentariat, this is a war that is chugging along exceptionally well. Everything that has been aimed at has been hit, pretty much, including the command and control structure, including the supreme leader, so-called, including those who were subordinate to him. Now there is a change. Now there is targeting of the infrastructure in terms of the Basij, that bloodthirsty, brutal organization that was responsible for the putting down of those who took to the streets in Iran several weeks ago and did so to the tune of many tens of thousands of victims. Also to the detonation of the prisons, also to the detonation of the internal security forces. And all of that is because Israel and the United States of America now has air dominance over the skies of Iran. This is absolutely proof positive that this regime was not able to protect itself nor its people. And so given that they can hover above and attack and destroy and detonate targets directly above those targets, we're now seeing the seeds being sown for internal discord and to impede the ability of this regime to yet continue to suppress the Iranian people. Now, whether or not that works remains to be seen. That is a longer mission set, and it's very, very early days in that sense. But no question about it, America and Israel together, with a profound degree of coordination and collaboration, are showing and talking to each other about how deeply, deeply aligned allies can actually bring about success against what those in the commentariat may be saying is an unlawful war, an inappropriate war. There are those on the United States right and left who are saying this is Israel's war and that Americans are dying because of Israel. Of course, we all mourn the loss of every single American life in this campaign, and we thank them and their families for their profound service towards the cause of freedom. But in terms of whether or not this is legal, that's a question for the lawyers to hash out. I am the son of an attorney. I can tell you that a case will be put forward and one attorney will commend a case to the listeners and to the tribunals and to the jurists, and another attorney will speak against it. And that will all be hashed out in the fullness of time and already is being done so. But one thing that's very clear is that the US Senate has given President Trump the ability to continue his actions inside Iran, rightly so. There were very, very few voices of dissent from among the Republican Party, and he's more than within his rights to be prosecuting this war as a national security concern for the United States of America across a period of at least 60 days. And I remind everybody, we're a mere 4 days into this war. It's very early. The idea that it has to be wrapped up is completely absurd. The only cautionary note that I would say, and I realize I may be an unpopular voice, is the state of Israel cannot come into the business of liberating another people. I've heard this rhetoric about so many campaigns, albeit in very distinct theaters, and I have not agreed with it then, and I don't agree with it now. By example, we heard the idea that the people of Gaza are wonderful people if only they were to be freed of the oppressive regime of Hamas. I didn't see those wonderful people when they stormed in after the terror attack on October the 7th, coming to the aid of any Israelis. I saw them come in and looting the Israeli people, those who were bleeding out in the various communities surrounding the Gaza Strip here inside Israel. We've heard it also about the Palestinian Arabs in Judea and Samaria. If you ask them, they support Hamas, not the Palestinian Authority, and they're not living beneath the jackboot of Hamas. And I don't frankly think that Israel has the luxury or the means of liberating the Iranian people writ large, which is why I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu has expressed that the goals of this are threefold. Number one, to bring about an end to the ballistic missile threat. Number two, to bring about an end to the terror proxy regime that is arrayed across our borders and throughout the region and throughout parts of the world. And number three, to prevent Iran from ever having a nuclear weapon. Those are the three virtuous goals. The Americans have added to that the complete destruction of the Iranian Navy, appropriately so. But I think it's correct that the responsibility for taking Iran into its own hands is placed squarely on the shoulders of the Iranian people, and it should not rest upon the American people, in my view, and absolutely should not rest upon Israel and the Israeli government. That is not our task here, and everybody should be clear about it.
Yeah, Benjamin, that's definitely an interesting take. Very eloquently put, I must say. What do you think are the prospects of the Abraham Accords, not only now, but potentially when this operation, when this war does wrap up? We don't know yet when that will be, but what do you think that will do? Do you think that will inspire Saudi Arabia to join the Abraham Accords and maybe even potentially other countries?
Yeah, just before I come to the Abraham Accords, I want to pass comment, if I may, about the difference here between the theater in Iran and what's going on in Venezuela. Venezuela is in America's backyard. Venezuela is in America's hemisphere, and the Americans can decide how they wish to proceed there. Iran, however, is squarely in the region here in the Middle East. And I want to say this not in my name, because I'm just one individual who's had the privilege of serving in the IDF, as has my interlocutor here at a far higher military rank. And I thank him, of course, for his wonderful service to our country and to our security over what I can imagine are many decades. But let the viewers be very, very clear about something. As just one soldier who's played his own small role in service in the IDF, myself, I can tell you, as can any combat veteran here in Israel, that I have fought in the wars of 2006, which is the Second Lebanon War. I was again drafted in 2012. I was then again drafted in 2014. I then served in this war inside the Gaza Strip, having unretired, as many, many volunteers did in order to play our part in the defense of this country. I have served during this war, and so much and so many of those campaigns aforementioned are a result of the Iranian influence, supply, and building up of proxies on our borders inside southern Lebanon, inside the Gaza Strip, even inside Judea and Samaria. And so any notion that anybody who remains assigned to the ideology of the Iranian jihadist terrorist regime that was in situ just 5 days ago, any notion that anyone who is an adherent to that ideology can somehow remain in power pending further negotiations brokered by the Americans fails to understand just what a menace this regime has been and just how dangerous it would be to allow any of them to remain in situ. The goal of this war, in that sense, because it is in Israel's backyard, for Israel, must be to ensure that these clerics, these fanatics, and these jihadists do not take power after everything that we are risking, after everything that we are doing, in order to rid ourselves of this terrible, terrible scourge. That is my view as an Israeli, and it's very distinct from what the Americans have to do or wish to do over in Venezuela in that sense. The second thing that I would say with regard to the Abraham Accords, we don't know what will happen, but I'm hopeful that we will not end up being victims of our own success, meaning when the people in the region, the powers in the region, feared that Iran might gain nuclear weapons capabilities, they cozied up to Israel because it was in their security interest to do so primarily. Now, if we do find ourselves having the success of defanging this regime in Tehran permanently, achieving the military goals, including ridding ourselves of the prospect of a nuclear-armed Iran, it may well be that some of those countries, no longer feeling the heat coming from Iran, feel less of a necessity to cozy up to and remain close to and to build relations with Israel. And the state and the country that is most profoundly in question there is Saudi Arabia, which, if our viewers recall, just prior to October the 7th, said very, very clearly that each day they get closer to normalization with Israel. And just a couple of weeks ago, obviously in the aftermath of October 7th, were speaking in profoundly anti-Semitic, anti-Israel terms. So we don't know where the Saudis are going to go. Time will tell. But I think that the best thing Israel can do is press on with this campaign together with the Americans and get rid of this scourge, this menace, once and for all. That has to be the top priority.
It's interesting that you say that, and I actually wanted to add to your argument on Saudi Arabia and the Abraham Accords that a key sticking point was in fact the issue in Gaza, and the Saudis were saying that there needs to be a credible pathway for a Palestinian state. Now that it's kind of been put on hold, Trump's board of peace and the rebuilding efforts in Gaza, we actually haven't been hearing a lot from Gaza as this Iran war has been taking over the headlines. But do you think that if there's enough progress inside of Gaza, that Saudi Arabia could be pushed when the conclusion of this operation to join? Just in a few words, if you can.
Yeah, thank you for that question. In my opinion, the Palestinian Arabs, specifically and most profoundly, but not exclusively those living inside the Gaza Strip, after their actions on October the 7th, and after we saw the actions not only of Hamas, not only of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, but also of the Gazans who cheered when our soldiers were paraded through their streets, when our hostages were taken through their streets, when our hostages were released, who continue to say that they support Hamas and the movement that they voted for, that people, in my view, regardless of any treatment from the Saudis for normalization, should forever be disqualified from independent statehood. They are not fit for statehood. The response and the reward for the worst terror attack to befall our people in the history of the state of Israel cannot be that statehood is conferred upon the Palestinian Arabs and that everybody in Gaza receives a brand new apartment in a high-rise apartment building funded by Gulf states. That to me seems utterly ridiculous. And if the Saudis state that they wish to see a Palestinian Arab state alongside the state of Israel, including with Jerusalem as its capital, and in response for that, we will be granted normalization with the Saudis, we must have the courage to turn around, in my view, and to say, thank you for the offer of normalization. You have thrown forward abnormal terms and conditions. We reject that opportunity. Now, I know that I might be a minority voice, but you, as October 7th proved, you can have normalization with any number of states in the region. But if you continue to face the terror threat coming from the Palestinian Arabs, your people here in Israel, we will be killed and we will face terrorism for generations to come. And the worst way that we could proceed now is to reward that terrorism by entering into the development of a Palestinian Arab state at the behest of the Saudis, who are yet to normalize. To me, it's completely absurd, and I would oppose and hope that any sensible Israeli would oppose any such developments.
I do want to thank you both, though, for coming on the show and speaking to us, Hanan Geffen and Benjamin Anthony. Thanks so much for joining.